Abdi Ahmed Mohamud, do solemnly swear that the evidence that I shall give before this Senate in respect of the matters before the Senate shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Thank you.
So, Mr. Abdi, introduce yourself to the Senate, the place you work, your rank, and how many years you've worked in that institution.
Thank you. My name is Abdi Mohamud. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. I have worked at the Commission since 2005. I started off as a senior investigator. Right now, I'm the Deputy Chief Executive Officer. My main responsibilities are to assist the Chief Executive Officer of the Commission in the day-to-day running of the Commission, among others. Another key role and responsibility that I hold at the Commission is that I chair the Commission Management Committee on Investigation Evaluation. Basically, I have been an investigator since 2005 when I joined the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. You are before the Senate this morning following summonses which were issued to your institution. And in the summonses, the 3 areas were identified. Would you wish to appraise the Senate on those 3 areas which you are to guide the Senate on?
Okay. If I may refer to my documents.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. So there are 3 areas that I was requested to comment on. The first one is an investigation that the Commission conducted on a procurement on the supply of long-lasting insecticide nets at the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, KEMSA. The second issue that I was to comment on is the declaration of gifts and donations received by His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua, the Deputy President, during his tenure of the office to date, pursuant to Section 14(5) of the Leadership and Integrity Act. The third issue that I was to comment on is the declaration of conflict of interest made to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission by His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya to date.
So we'll go to the first question, or the first issue, which you are asked to address yourself to. And I wish to refer the witness, Honorable Speaker, to our bundle 8 of our documents. Can you identify the document at page 3 of that document?
Yes, I can identify. This is a letter that we did to the Clerk of the National Assembly on 23rd September 2024. It was responding to a letter that we received from the National Assembly requesting us to furnish the National Assembly with information on the investigation that we conducted on the long-lasting insecticide nets, and to indicate in our responses any outcome or status of the investigation that we did conduct.
So your letter in that volume relates to procurement of certain items at KEMSA, am I correct?
You are correct.
You've appraised the Senate, the National Assembly in that letter. Would you appraise the Senate on its contents?
The content is the procurement of long-lasting insecticides by KEMSA. This was in the year 2023, and the Commission, in its functions, either it conducts investigation on its own motion or at the instigation of other parties. For this particular investigation, we did receive a letter from the CS, who was then in charge of the Ministry of Health, indicating that there were certain irregularities in a procurement of insecticide nets by the KEMSA, and the CS then wanted us to conduct investigation and find out whether certain procurement irregularities did take place. And from that, we actually did carry out investigation, and the outcome of the investigation so far is already reflected in the letter that we have provided.
And what was the outcome of the investigations, Mr. Mahmood?
There were serious procurement challenges that affected that particular tender. The major one was change of specifications to suit a company called Shobika Impex Limited, which was having which had a local agent by the name Crystal Kenya Limited that had the sole responsibility, or rather the sole function, to provide certain mosquitoes that had certain chemicals. So basically what the investigation concluded is that there are two types of chemicals that were used on these particular nets. If I may read one of them, one is called Synergist Piperolin Butoxide, PBO, long-lasting insecticides nets, while the other one is pyrethroid, long-lasting insecticide nets. So this company had the sole distribution rights on this particular chemical called PPO, and in totality, from the investigation, we realized that the PS at that particular time did write to the CEO of KEMSA, instigating, or rather compelling the CEO of KEMSA to change the specifications so that it can fit the chemical that was to be provided by Shobika Impex Limited, whose local agent was Crystal Kenya Limited. Basically, that was the starting point. The other problem was that there was, when the tender was to close on 23rd, the company, this is Shobika Impex Limited, at that particular time wanted to have a bid bond introduced into the documents, into the tender documents. Yet we all know that in procurement, the tender document, the bid bond is supposed to be part of the tender document. They're supposed to be delivered together. But in this circumstance, the bid bond was delivered by hand to the CEO's office on 23rd when the tender was supposed to close. So they had to find a way of extending the period of closure up to 10th of the next month of March, so that that particular bid bond, which had issues, can now be factored in, or rather regularized, and so that this company called Shobika could benefit out of that particular extension. Of course, there are many other issues. Like, we also realized that at the end of the, when the tender was discontinued, for example, there is a company called Tianjin Yorkol International Trading Company that was among the bidders that initially bidded for this particular tender. They were disqualified on a fact that they were not authorized by a manufacturer. This company had provided sufficient evidence and proof that they're actually manufacturers. So a company that is a manufacturer was disqualified on the ground that they did not provide authorization from a manufacturer, yet they are actually manufacturers. So those are some of the challenges that the tender had. And
At the end of it all, what became of this tender?
At the end of what happened is after the technical committee of the KEMSA did recommend Shopika to be awarded the tender, because this tender was actually was being financed by Global Fund. So the agreement was after the tender evaluation committee's report is done, that report is to be handed over to Global Fund, the financiers. So when that report was surrendered or handed over to the Global Fund realized...
You said the evaluation committee of KEMSA
yes,
made a recommendation that Shopika be awarded.
That was the finding. That was the finding of KEMSA. That was the recommendation by the technical committee.
What happened next?
What happened is Global Fund decided to terminate the tender and asked an internal firm, or rather an internal organization called Wombo.org, which is the procuring arm of Global Fund, to do the procurement. And eventually, one of the companies that were actually disqualified because they were not authorized by a manufacturer ended up winning that tender, together with another firm called A to Z Textile Mills Limited. So those were the eventual winners, but that was after the termination of the recommendation by the technical committee of KEMSA.
So, just to clarify to the Senate, a company which had been disqualified by KEMSA ended up being the supplier.
That is correct.
Following the process which was undertaken by Global Fund.
That is correct.
Okay. What became of the bid bond?
Well, when we were investigating this, when the investigation was ongoing, we collected all the bid bonds of the firms that actually bidded, so that not only the bid bonds, but all the documents that related to the tender, so that we could evaluate and record statements. Now, the one that had issues was this one for Shopika. But when the tender was terminated, ordinarily, there would be no need to hold onto tenders or onto documents submitted by the tenderers, and they're usually returned. But for this particular one, because it was a questioned document, the CEO of KEMSA wrote to the EACC requesting for that document to be handed over. And eventually we did hand over the document to him after recommending disciplinary action against all the officers who were involved in the tendering process, starting with the CEO, the technical committee members, the head of procurement entity. For this particular document, we have a certified copy, which we collected in case there would be need to reopen the investigation, because there could have been other offenses that could come out of the investigation.
Did you hand over the bid bonds for the other companies which had participated in this?
They were returned to KEMSA.
They were returned to KEMSA. Yeah. Let's go to the second issue, which was identified in your invite, and probably we should start with the third one, which relates to conflict of interest by state officers and public officers. You are a long-serving officer of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. I suppose you are familiar with conflict of interest in terms of the constitutional, statutory, and regulatory procedures. Would you appraise the Senate on that aspect?
Okay, thank you. So conflict of interest is actually addressed under Section 16 of the Leadership and Integrity Act. And it clearly states that a state officer or a public officer shall use the best efforts to avoid being in a situation where personal interest conflict or appear to conflict with the state officers or public officers' official duties. Now, when we talk of personal interest, we look at section 6, which explains or rather indicates that personal interest includes interest of spouse, child, business associates, agents, or any other matter in which the state officer or public officer has a direct or indirect pecuniary interest. Basically, in practice, what happens is we also have the regulation, which is the subsidiary law of that particular act. If we look at the conflict of interest, that particular part 3 of the leadership and integrity regulations clearly specifies how conflict of interest are supposed to be dealt with by public officers.
And in summary, how are state officers to deal with questions of conflict?
All public institutions are actually required to maintain a conflict of interest registers, which can be inspected by individuals upon application. That is the starting point. If, for example, a public officer or a state officer feels that he is conflicted, he is supposed to declare the conflict in that particular register. And you know, the commission also has a role in that the commission is actually mandated to enforce and implement the Leadership and Integrity Act together with the regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. And did you say, did I hear you correctly say that conflict of interest extends to children, spouses, and business associates? Did I hear you correctly?
That is correct. That is subsection 6, section 16.
Let's go to the third issue in view of time, which is in relation to gifts.
Okay, gifts. If you look at section 14 of the Leadership and Integrity Act, together with section 5 of the regulations of the same act, it is clearly indicated that gifts received by a public officer is a donation to the state. That is what regulation 5 indicates. If you go down there, you'll also see that a state officer or public officer who receives a gift whose value exceeds 20,000 Kenya shillings shall within 48 hours of reporting to the office surrender it to the public entity in which the officer is employed. It also goes further in subsection 4 to indicate that a state officer or a public officer who receives a gift in terms of this regulation shall, irrespective of the monetary value of the gift, declare the gift received to public entity which the public officer represents. Finally,
all gifts are supposed to be declared regardless of its monetary value.
Yeah, maybe, yes, that is correct. But what I maybe should have mentioned is that public officers and state officers are barred to receive any monetary gift. So here we are dealing with gifts that are not non-monetary. For monetary, they are barred, or rather we are barred from receiving any monetary gift. But yeah, so this.
And in the same manner, with respect to conflict of interest, we have a register of conflict of interest. Do we have a register of gifts?
Yes, we have a register of benefits in each and every public agency where officers who receive gifts are supposed to declare immediately, and we have indicated in 48 hours. And what I would also wish to mention is that
what is the role of the Commission in relation to gifts?
Okay. Yeah, now if you look at subsection 9 of the regulations, you will see that a public entity shall, at the close of every financial year, furnish the Commission with a report specifying, and all the gifts, any gift the entity intends to dispose of, all that. And then subsection 3, of course, talks about report. The report under paragraph 1 shall be submitted to the Commission within 30 days after the close of the financial year.
So just so that we can close on that, every financial year, the Commission is supposed to receive the registers of gifts from all state entities.
That is correct.
For your record.
Yeah.
Have you received the register of gifts from the Office of the Deputy President?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge. That will be all, Mr. Speaker.
Counsel for the Deputy President, you may now proceed to cross-examine the witness.
Thank you very